3 hours. So we've left the world, if you will, and come back to the United States as opposed to one of the other foreign countries that we visited this morning. And so now we're out in California, and Delash is going to take us to a project called Oil Island.
Thank you. So I'd like to start by thanking Lindsay May, my chair, as well as Carl Dupuy, and all of my friends and family that have helped me throughout this process. This is Oil Island, repurposing Southern California's offshore drilling platforms. So the agenda for today is to start with some background, then move into site, program, the assembly strategy, and finally end with the design implementation. So some background. In August of 2017, Hurricane Harvey hit the Gulf Coast of Texas, devastating Houston and similar areas with damage that would take years to recover. Often overlooked in stories like this is what happens off the coast. So the platforms in the Gulf were also hit, and they spilled about 22,000 barrels of crude oil into the Gulf. This is the Ocean Star Offshore Drilling Rig and Museum. The purpose of this museum is to look at drilling as well as educate on the history and the work of offshore platforms. Something this museum does not talk about is tragedies such as Hurricane Harvey and other stories where oil is spilled into the ocean and causes damage. The approach for this thesis is to provide an alternative approach to offshore platforms other than to glorify what the oil industry is doing. In the world, there are currently 1,470 offshore platforms. Each circle on this map indicates a region of drilling, and the size indicates how many platforms are in that region. In the United States, today, there are 203 active platforms. In the eyes of the oil companies, there are 3 potential outcomes for offshore platforms. The first is to keep the structure and to reuse it, similar to the Ocean Star Museum. The second is to partially remove the structure. This is the cheapest option and what is mostly done. And the last option is to fully remove the structure, which has the potential to return the site to a natural state. So, looking at these 3 options, which is the most viable? We need to consider a few things when looking at this. First is the embodied energy. In one offshore platform, there's enough embodied energy to be equivalent to 180 single-family homes. The monetary cost is between $80 million and $8 billion, depending on the site, the size, and the type of construction. This is equivalent to single-family homes of an equivalent embodied energy is 45 million, for comparison. Next, we need to look at what happens when an offshore platform is removed. This is a scrapyard where an offshore platform, as you can see in the background, has been laid waste. Here people can come by and pick apart what's on the structure, what was there, but recycling and reusing any of the heavy structure is difficult because of the size and quantity. Lastly, the platforms aren't all bad. Under the water, marine life thrives by having excess and available surface area for colonization. This is a picture of the platforms in California where marine life has completely taken over and the endangered and threatened species are supported. The rockfish in Southern California has actually made a comeback because of the offshore rigs. So with all of these considerations, it was decided to try to repurpose an existing platform. Moving into the site, where is the best place to test this thesis? Southern California has a wide range of offshore platforms there that could benefit from enough sea life to support, as well as a strong desire of the public to cease drilling. Within the circle shown between Newport Beach and Santa Catalina Island is a unit of 4 platforms called the Beta Unit. Looking closely, or more closer, these 4 platforms were previously named Edith, Ellie, and Ellen, who are connected by a bridge, and Eureka. The These platforms benefit not only from existing ferry routes from Catalina Island to the coast, which can be slightly altered to allow easy access, but they also benefit from strong coastal breezes and pretty mild weather, all of which would help support the energy generation mechanisms to be discussed later. So, what is the existing condition of these platforms? Currently, well, overall, to support offshore platforms and people living there, the main things that are challenging is how do you get water there, how do you get energy, and where does the waste go? Looking first at how water is brought there in the existing state, potable water is brought from land. In some instances where the offshore platform is too remote or not easily serviced by land, they do attempt to desalinate water for usage. Energy on site is produced via diesel generators, which of course produces more than their fair share of greenhouse gases, as well as requiring servicing from land. Lastly, the waste. Existing wastewater is either taken to the land where it is disposed of, or it can be dumped into the ocean should they deem it's clean enough. I don't know how they deem it's clean enough, but if it's clean enough. And they can also inject it into the seafloor via the existing tubes from the rig. So, looking at the structure of the two platforms selected, they're designed to be extremely redundant, as you can see in this section over here. Being in Southern California, you do have the challenges of earthquakes as well as tides from earthquakes across the Ring of Fire. The redundant design of this structure was designed to withstand a 1,000-year earthquake as well as a 45-foot wave, with some plastic deformation, but without failing. The structure was primarily what was kept for this design, as well as the cranes for construction, which I will talk a little bit about later, because the buildings and the systems that exist could be improved upon. So moving into program. This thesis' focus is to take something negative and bad for the environment and make something positive. So in order to choosing a program for that, what is good for the future? What could this be used for? How can we use this unique site? So it was decided that this program, a program of a satellite campus for the Southern California universities, where students could come for a semester to study areas of study that are close and immersive to the site. So the areas of study selected were hydrology, marine science, sustainable engineering, meteorology, and astronomy. Looking how each area of study has a set number of program within it that was able to support the overall building. Each program, or each department, can house 25 students for an entire semester, as well as holding 2 laboratories, one for education and one for research, 10 offices for research faculty who will commute to the platforms from the mainland, as well as classrooms of various sizes and other shared spaces. The entirety of the program includes 155,000 square feet, as well as having a few extra supplementary spaces to support the students who are there throughout the semester, such as a presentation hall, a dining hall, and a recreation space. The total occupancy load of the platform during the semester fluctuates between 130 to 200 people. So, building in a remote site is something that is a challenge in and of itself. So it was decided that early on that this project would benefit heavily from a module design strategy. Each module, with the dimensions shown here, are constructed on land and brought to the site, where they can be assembled with the use of the existing cranes that were kept. On this site, it was important to keep the structural integrity of the platform to allow for staying afloat and not being affected by the lateral loads of the wave and wind, as well as any earthquakes. So the modules were designed to nestle into the structure instead of interrupt it. Here, these are the module configurations that were used in this project, with aligning, stacking, and rotating of modules to allow for the spaces within them to change and adapt to what the program demanded. The assembly of each module consists of a steel tube framing, which is welded to steel footings, which are on the existing decking, to allow for a strong connection and to tie the existing structure to the new. The exterior material is a stainless steel panel system that was chosen because it could easily withstand the weathering from seawater spray, as well as being relatively low embodied energy because of the quantity of recycled steel we have in this country. So, how does all of this come together in your design? We're going to start at the lowest level and work our way up. At the seafloor level, there were 2 floors created on the existing structure. These house the water tanks, one for potable water and one for wastewater. The potable water can support 500 people a day. Next to the wastewater systems, there's also a desalinization system that allows for a steady influx of water going through its first stage of purification. On this level, you can also see that the ferry drops off at this level, and students and faculty can come to this level to relax, hang out by the water, as well as engage with the water should their area of study demand it. At the first level, and at every main level of existing decking, is an area of study. On this first level, there is marine science and hydrology, as shown here. These are the labs for them, as well as supplementary spaces such as recreation and classrooms, as well as offices. The vertical circulation is located central to the platforms to provide wayfinding because it's red and it easily contrasting to all of the other things in the area, as well as providing ample views when you're going up the elevator. On the first mezzanine level, the department area program is rounded out with the remainder of the offices here, as well as an upstairs, more private area for labs. On the second level, pretty similar to the first level, you get the meteorology and sustainable engineering departments. Here you get the main recreation hall as well as an IT room, as well as the classrooms and offices. In this view, you can see one of the labs. And on the side, you can see which modules were used in this level. Second mezzanine level is pretty similar to the first in that there's more office space and some more flex spaces such as classrooms and the lounge. Level 3 is the first level that is notably different from the other levels in that the more northern platform, LE, has the astronomy department, as well as the more southern platform, LN, housing the dining hall and the presentation spaces. On this level, in that view on the edges at the bottom, there's also housing for faculty that needs to remain on site overnight or throughout the semester, as opposed to the commuters. At this level, there is also the implementation of wastewater treatment areas. And this is how the water goes through its final steps of purification so that it can be reused by the people on site. At this level, the last mezzanine level, the astronomy department is rounded out with a supplementary space between the 2 upstairs labs, which acts as an observatory, as you can see in this main section here. Level 4, here you can start to see the solar panels being implemented on the level beneath, as well as the dome for the observatory. At this level, student housing houses student housing with indoor and outdoor spaces for living. Each house has 2 stacked units, or 2 stacked modules with 6 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a living space, and a kitchen. At the top level, you have the upstairs of the housing with the remainder of the bedrooms upstairs. As you can see in this view, all of the modules are colored differently to indicate and highlight the differentiation between the modules. In this project, the total number of modules is 151. In this overview of the entire project, you can see all of the PV panels and a wind turbine that have been installed on site to allow for energy generation, as well as in these sections you can see wave turbines underwater. The structure used is created with the sense that all of the energy required could be generated on site. The wall sections here show the large extent of insulation to prevent the loss of the desired temperature, as well as in that small section over there, you can see how daylighting is achieved in winter, and during the summer, the existing overhangs prevent a lot of solar gain. Ultimately, this thesis is about creating an alternative approach to the life of an offshore oil platform so that its meaning can be less negative for the world, and it is not an icon of the fossil fuel industry, and how we can change that in the future to be an icon of the sustainable future that we're aiming to look for. Thank you.
So, just a quick question. How far offshore are the platforms from?
8 miles.
8 miles? Okay. So, and you said that there's a ferry already that connects from the mainland to
Catalina
the
Island,
island?
yes.
Right. Okay. So that's good. That's already in process. Did you talk to universities that had these programs and talk about their needs for having research on site?
No, but I have, in my experience, I did undergrad in biology, and I was fortunate enough to do a study abroad at one of these, well, not one of these, but a field station for coral reefs.
Okay.
And I found that getting into the field is something that's very unique and something that you really have to do to experience and learn.
Okay, so 2 more questions for you. Was the lower platform, it looks like it goes for the full deck. Yeah, the at sea or sea level?
Yes.
That's already existing, or is that something that
so that's just, that's decking that is added. Currently, sorry, it's kind of far away from you.
That's okay.
But currently there's like maybe half of that existing platform. So basically we'd be adding on to just like flush out to the sides.
And the last question I had was, I understand the use of the modules for constructability and adding. What is existing of the current structure that you're reusing as far as the habitable space, not just the steel platforms, but what is the habitable space that you're reusing?
So the habitable space right now is basically stick built, and its installation's not very good.
Okay.
It's basically, let's see if I can get back to that image. Basically, it had a lot left to be desired. So there's like 1 or 2 windows here and there. It's really just built to be a machine for production. It's not really a nice place to visit. And if you look, like, you never see people there. I have not found a single picture with people on a platform, which I think is really weird. But as well as like energy generation, making sure that this is a sustainable thing. The existing building and systems just weren't.
So do they have, sorry to follow up questions. How many crew are usually occupying each platform
currently.
And then how many, I think you said something about like 25 students from each discipline?
Yeah,
And you're accommodating all of those?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the idea is that they are not stranded here. The ferry is designed to go, well, ferry already existing goes to Catalina Island 5 times a day. So I imagine that route would just keep going. So if they needed to go get groceries or go home for some reason, they could at any of the given times. So
You're not housing all the students on site?
I am housing them, but it's not like permanent.
Right.
They have access to the city, yeah.
Okay. All right, I think those were all the questions. I think this thesis, I mean, it's simply a unique perspective and a nice reuse of something. I would like to have seen a little bit more about, that tie-in with programs, maybe with universities nearby that would have, given you a little bit more tangible connection to this and thinking about, how feasible it is and how they would relocate programs and, within that. That would be the only thing. I think otherwise, it's an interesting idea, like how you went into the materiality of the station to understand certainly the seismic concerns and other things that are there.
So you might actually have the information, but I'm not necessarily convinced that your science works out. I don't know if one wind turbine is going to supply the energy needed.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can actually treat the amount of water that you need in the space that you've allocated for it. So, but I recognize that it's an academic exploration and that those are ideas that interest you. I'm particularly interested in your investigation of the modular construction, since that's actually, that's something that's very real. There are hotels that are literally being built like that right now with, rooms being assembled off-site, trucked downtown and slid into a structure. And I think that's actually really fascinating that you incorporated that here. The original image almost is an inspiration for that, particularly the segment on the left that, they haven't organized it as neatly, but those are little modules stacked on top of each other. So I think that's pretty cool. As for living space, I don't know that somebody living here for an entire semester would have a satisfactory experience. There's barely any vegetation. There aren't many amenities. So I almost see it as something that you would spend a week or two at a time rather than an entire semester, but as a concept, it's an interesting exploration.
Yeah, that was something how long people were here was something that I struggled with a little bit, as well as vegetation. I know the connection to vegetation is very nice, but I don't know how sustainable it would be to truck a bunch of soil out here and how the turnover rate would work, so that was kind of kept moving.
Right, you have to balance what your priorities are.
Yes. Yes.
There you go.
Yeah. Fair.
Which you'll have.
This is just coming this way. So talk to me about why you kept the cranes. Are they useful?
Yes. So I kept them for two main reasons. The first is that this is designed so that with the modules, as future need is there, they can continually add modules. And the cranes are helpful in construction. That way, from helicopters, you don't need all of that extra systems or logistics. Secondly, the cranes act as a form of egress. So egress on a platform is similar to that of a cruise ship. So in the plans, I have on each level storage for inflatable rafts, and those will be lowered into the water via the cranes. So I felt that those two things were pretty important, so that's why I kept them.
And the only other thing is, kind of begs the question for me, is if you explored putting anybody under the water.
I thought
like any of these modules. I feel like the modules could have been explored a lot more. Maybe you have explored them. But I'm even looking now, tons of people do modular construction. They do beautiful homes in the woods. They do, our office does, actually started doing hospital rooms as modules. So modular construction, there's a ton of stuff you can do with it. Like even fenestration, I'm looking at the images and I'm drawn to the color, but I'm not necessarily drawn to the architecture that's there.
Tough question.
So can you talk about anything you explored and/or the underwater component? I want to stick some under that.
Yeah, so originally, if you look at my old thesis presentation poster that I'm thinking about, like just proposing the idea, I did have underwater structure. However, I felt that really required me weighing the pros and cons of removing the existing life, which is one of my reasons for keeping it. So I felt, well, yes, it'd be nice to go underwater, it'd be really unique. I felt that keeping the existing colonies and ecosystems was probably better and simpler. And then as far as the overall design strategy, there are a couple things that I wanted to keep in mind. And you can see in my process a little later if you want to. But the main winds that come through the site are from the south and from the northeast, and I wanted to make sure that in the process of putting platform modules here, I wasn't creating basically just like a big wind tunnel. And I had it to be a little bit more porous than what is existing there, just so that light and air could get through without being a little overwhelming. As far as the windows, I wanted to have a very simple approach to fenestration because it's easier if there's a simple shape for construction of modules so that it's just a repetition, but also because a simple perfect square is sort of recalling the nautical theme of perfect dimension.
That's an interesting, I have not heard of that. The thing about square windows is if you're looking up at them, they don't look square because they're foreshortened.
Yeah, but from inside.
So I have two comments I'd like to make. It's a very nice presentation.
Thank you.
Very clear. The first one is, you mentioned that doing field work, it's great to be out in the field.
Mm-hmm.
But if this is all water-related field work, no one's in the water. No one gets to the water. And when I think about the experience of, so that's one comment. And when I think about the experience of living and studying up there, removed above the sea, I start to wonder, well, what's my day like? And I'm walking on these clanking platforms, and with all that sun, couldn't I be growing some food? Couldn't I enrich my human experience while I'm there? And that also raises the question of the bridge. That's going to be an important moment in your day when you walk across that bridge.
Mm-hmm.
What's on one side versus the other? And did you arrange it so that people would walk across the bridge a lot or not? Or how did you...
Starting out with, I guess, the experience and why those areas of study were selected, the idea was that given the circumstances and the opportunity, they can go into the water. I don't show anybody in the water, but they can, at least hydrology and marine science. The other three areas of study are more focused on the structure for sustainable engineering, and the other two are more focused on the sky, astronomy and meteorology. And those two were selected because this is a unique site that is able to support the bustling LA region without being surrounded by light pollution. So astronomy is, I think, my opinion, is a good place to be situated here because you have great views of the sky.
Does the crane obstruct vision though from the planetarium?
So the cranes also rotate. Yes. And then the last thing, what was the last thing you were talking about?
The bridge.
The bridge, yes. So on the more southern side, which is Ellen, you have two areas of study, and then you have the dining hall and some housing. And then on the more northern side, you have the computer lab, the recreation space, lecture hall. So basically, to get to the supplementary spaces, you would go from one side to the other and back and forth. The experience on the bridge was left sort of as is to allow for the people to really experience what it's like to be to see everything around you, views from all around. It's wide enough to hang out there if you wanted to, take a break. But it's really about the procession and getting from one place to another while being surrounded by the views and experiencing the wind.
I'm like the others. I want to get in the water. Somehow I want to get to the water. I don't know how. I'm conjuring up this whole kind of imaginative story of going down these tubes into the water, and what I find is that you're very efficient. This is very efficient and very engineered, and I think you're very successful with that. But for me, it lacks the imagination that could, or the imaginative wonder that this project holds. And in many ways, the existing platforms look more exciting architecturally and formally than what you have done. But I know making it exciting wasn't your priority. You're being very efficient. It's almost like naval architecture, right? The shipbuilding, where everything has to be very efficient, accounted for, and so on. And I think you're succeeded in that. But can't the bridge be more than the bridge? Can we do something?
Bungee diving.
Can we do more than just have the bridge? But if you want to be efficient, no, you can't. It needs to be a bridge. And I'm looking for those opportunities. I think one of the opportunities that might even be reasonable and rational is this idea of bringing more life to the greenery, plant life or whatever. And I don't know if you need soil, maybe you grow them water. There must be some way to get a little more of the earth on here to give the experience or have the experience of that enhanced.
Even how they're rendered, it's the flat line of the ocean. There's no connection, there's no overlap of the water and the structure and the people.
And then the one experience that didn't quite sit well with me is the entering this, right? You enter it with the desalination platform and the water storage, and at one instance I was looking for some of the basic principles of architecture, entry and the entry sequence, and harmony and balance, and some of these basic principles. And I know it doesn't, that may not be appropriate for this, but that one point of entry of this wonderful, magical place to study, it seems like I'm entering in the back door in the storage area and so on. And I think you could have really enhanced that as a way of enlivening this facility.
To jump in with what everybody else has said, there's not too much that's different in the architectonic quality of what you've done than what's already there. I think that you could have made this fantastic place. I mean, it's part of your thesis to challenge yourself. It's not much different than the top of a skyscraper. And today we see what people are doing with skyscrapers between those gardens. It only takes about 3 feet of earth to grow a tree, for instance. That this shouldn't look like an oil rig anymore. It should be this incredible mirage almost, like in the ocean. It should be this other thing. Yeah, just this other thing. Oasis, floating above the ocean. That would be incredible. And you still can do that. Right now, you've just kept the industrial aesthetic. And, it's one notch from being those, so trendy with people taking, what are those things they put on ships? Shipping containers.
That's what I thought it was.
Yeah, where there should be 2-story spaces, something that's glassier, just more, look at some of these things you see on HBO. There's things flying in the air and there's gardens in them. It should be something else. You've got this infrastructure here, that then you need to populate it with fantasy. And where you're on, you can do that.
Yeah, I'm going to echo all of that again. I agree. I think what happened is that you got kind of like stuck in this world of like the modular thing, which I think could have been great in certain cases, but I think there's opportunities either for the module to change, like for it to be different when it's housing versus something else, or for there to be moments where you actually are building something that's different. So all of the points about where stuff should be happening, and I literally want to take one of your boxes or a new box and like attach it to the bridge. There's like a space. You know, I was thinking about there's the shop building in New York, the American Copper building that has this bridge, and like in the bridge is like a pool. So couldn't there be like an activity space or a viewing thing? And then I started thinking, couldn't this be more like adaptive reuse than just like scraping everything away, you know? And like, I want the big tower thing. If you're gonna keep the cranes, why not keep the big tower and then your observatory is at the top of this giant, you know, tower in space. And then the same thing with the water surface. I was thinking, you know, you're looking at, there's a precedent you had of Snøhetta, and they have that incredible restaurant that I really want to go to called Under, which is literally going under the water. So imagine the cafeteria or something is like down in the water and you go in and you see fish going around you, and then it changes that whole idea. The great point about the entry, it's like that perspective is like, oh my God, like don't touch this and don't touch that. You might burn your hand or you might, you know, hurt yourself. I want you to come in and there to be a space where people arrive, and like if the cafeteria or some kind of event space was there, that okay, if the water sea level rises and it goes underwater, it's gone. But or you can go down into it and use it for undersea exploration. So, and I don't think you would have had to do it, plaster this stuff all on the bottom and get rid of all the sea life. It could have been one module or two modules that get attached. So I think you just had you got kind of restricted by the module and how you laid it all out and the little like stacking boxing things, and I think you need to be like let go a little bit. You've got this, you already have this incredible infrastructure that's like very static, and how do you utilize that more playfully?
Just one more thing is, between the two platforms, they're basically the same, and your approach to them is basically the same, right? You've swapped out a little bit of the program, but I think maybe you missed an opportunity there too to explore them being completely different, right? And maybe one of them is a lush, robust, fully planted, you know, living piece.
Maybe all residential.
And the other one is all your program and academic. It just has two very different feels. Right now they're a pair and they work together, sort of, you know, but I think you could have pushed the duality of those two.
And to just tag on to that, it's really all about the human experience. I mean, I think people who work on oil whatever, out in the ocean are paid an enormous amount of money to go out there and spend a lot of time. You're not paying these people. Right. So you have to create a place they want to be. And I think that's what's missing here. It's all worked out, engineered beautifully, you know, you could see it being built. But it's not a place I want to be.
Okay.
And we have to design for that too.
Just similar to Monica's point about how you differentiate between the two platforms and what you could have done. I mean, you're making a small city or a small campus, and we're not really seeing aspects of urban design in what's shown. There were some decisions about how to allocate your program, but we didn't really hear about how it would then relate to usage and experience.
I have a comment about the astronomy. My older daughter's an astronomer, and astronomy is about collecting data, not just looking at stars. And that little dome isn't going to do much. And you probably still have a whole lot of light pollution from Los Angeles, but you could put up radio astronomy discs and have them on all the platforms that are out there and link them together, and then you have a big observation of radio astronomy that you might be able to do some real astronomy with.
Like a very large array that accepts smaller. That's totally appropriate. My wife named one of the stars when she was in radio astronomy for yours truly.
Mia has a star named after her too.
Well, I think you heard from everyone a little bit more whimsy, you know, this is a platform for learning, you know, make it exciting to be there. You know, and it's that
you know, this is a thesis project you're allowed to explore and create, and yeah, I think we wanted to see a little bit more of that brought to this, especially because I think it was a great idea to have the university program, but you know, what makes it exciting to be part of the program? What makes it worth being out here and overcome some of the constraints that people experience, you know, and that's supplemented by their income, but they just can't wait to get back from the platform. How do you overcome that? How do you link to the water? So, yeah. Thank you.
Well, Michael, I hope you are proud of all the work on the wall. You've come a really far way from that first poster that you referenced, and that was so powerful. I think the thesis here challenges the notions of site. It contributes to conversations across different theses about what it means to have a site, what it means to find a site. And I think it serves to remind all of us, your classmates, the faculty, and all of us architects, practitioners, scholars, to look beyond what is and what we know as our built environment, and to imagine new imaginative fantasy uses and new imaginative and fantasy architectures, to go beyond the familiar and really invent new worlds given what we have around us that lays sort of latent and untapped. So congratulations.
Thank you.
What?
Go ahead.
I was just asking if you ever went on.
So the Ocean Star Museum, I actually went on.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to be on the other side.